Welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman, a podcast loaded with practical tips, powerful scripts, personal stories, and simple steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. So get ready to get the information you need to make the impact you want from someone you trust, your friend, parenting expert, Dr. Robyn Silverman.
Hello and welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything, where we give you the tips, scripts, stories, and steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. I'm so honored to be your host, Dr. Robyn Silverman, child and teen development specialist, author and speaker, and most importantly, parent of two great kids who give me the opportunity to love, learn, and grow every single day, whether I want to or not. Believe me, I get it. It's not always easy, but we're in this together, and we have some great people helping us along the way. Now, did you know that Denmark has been voted as having the happiest people in the world by the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, almost every year since 1973? That's more than 40 years of happiness. It begs the question, is it the parenting? I mean, is there a Danish way of parenting? It turns out there is, and while the Danish way of parenting is not the only reason Danes are the happiest, it does play an important role, and the success of it all seems to be tied to the ways they educate children far beyond academics, focusing on play, empathy, and social skills. It's important to delve into it. I hope you would agree, since happy kids tend to grow up to be happy adults who raise happy kids, and the seasons go round and round again. And while in the United States and in other areas of the world, we're seeing an increase of antidepressants, suicides among young people, and mental health diagnoses, as well as a great deal of competition between parents and kids, we have a lot to learn from the Danes. Best-selling author, journalist, Danish parenting expert, and cultural researcher Jessica Alexander wrote a great book called The Danish Way of Parenting, What the Happiest People in the World Know About Raising Confident, Capable Kids, and it's been published in over 25 countries. Her work has been featured in Time, The Wall Street Journal, Salon, Huffington Post, NPR, the New York Times, and many more places. She regularly does talks and workshops for parents, schools, and organizations like Google, the Women's Network of the United Nations, the World Parenting Forum, and many more. She has also worked as a spokesperson for Lego on the power of play. I'm so excited to have you on the show, so welcome Jessica Alexander to How to Talk to Kids About Anything.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you on this show. I've read your book. It's got some really interesting pieces to it, and I really am excited to delve in. But before we get into the bulk of the interview, for those who haven't yet gotten their hands on your book, what gets you up in the morning, and what inspired you to write this best-selling book?
Well, it was a bit of a long journey, I have to say. It began with, I was living in different countries for work, and then I met my husband, who's Danish, and I was always observing, cultural differences, and I was fascinated by cultural differences and studying languages. But then it wasn't until I had children and I really saw how differently people in different countries raise their kids. So in Norway, for example, they put children outside in minus 20-degree weather, and it's super common, and this is what you do, and it's very much encouraged. In Japan, 10-year-olds are taking the metro by themselves to school. In England, I noticed they were really obsessed with kids going to bed at 7 p.m. with a warm bottle of milk, and then Italy was completely opposite. Kids were going to bed at midnight. So what was happening was I became aware of these cultural differences in terms of parenting were extremely, it was like, this is the way you do it. So I mean, how deeply these beliefs were for these different places that I was going with my babies, and I realized, wow, it started making me question my own beliefs, because I would go in one country and I would see, but this is how you do it, and if you said anything else, it was like, no, that's wrong.
Right.
And then you go someplace else, right. So it started making me think, wow, what are my beliefs? And so these are called cultural default settings. or parental ethnotheories is the actual terminology. It's the beliefs we have as parents that's affected by our culture, and it's like settings on a computer. It's what we're programmed with, and so I started questioning it, and now for years, let me go back a ways. For many years, I had been aware of children in Denmark being extremely happy and well behaved and respectful. And I don't know if you've ever been to Denmark or Scandinavia.
Well,
Have you?
I went around Europe quite a bit, but I didn't get specifically to Denmark.
Okay. So the first time, just to tell you, the first time I went, I mean, many, like we're talking 20 years ago, and I was seriously like, what's going on with all the kids here? They're just so serene and so peaceful, and so for many years I was kind of like just studying what the parents were doing and what the teachers were doing, and being aware that there was definitely something different. But it wasn't until I had my daughter, and I'd read like hundreds of parenting books to prepare myself.
Yes, right.
I was determined to be prepared. But then when I had her, I found that I preferred my Danish family's advice to all the books. And my friends and family, whatever. I just slowly started to just only go to them for advice. And this was happening. I had my son, the same thing. Like I just stopped going to the books. Anytime I needed something, it was like, that's what I knew the answer was there. And then I was on vacation one day, and I was reading the newspaper while my husband was playing with my daughter in a very Danish way fashion. And I read that Denmark had been voted as the happiest country. And I was really shocked because I'm American and my country is obsessed with happiness. And I thought, like, how don't I know this? And then I found out, 40 years in a row, they're always in the top 3 of the happiest countries in the world. This year, they're number 2 for 40 years in a row. And I was like, I'm like, wow. And then I look at my husband and I think, oh my God, it's the parenting. I like, the happy kids grow up to be happy parents who raise happy kids. It's a cycle, and it's these default settings, these cultural default settings that we just pass on and on. And I had this light bulb go off in my head because it had changed me so much as a parent and as a person, that I knew it could help others. So I was like, I have to write this book. And, I called a friend who was a Danish psychologist, and I was like, does this exist? And she said, no. And I was like, okay. And that's how the book was born, essentially.
Excellent.
Sorry, it's a long story, but
no, that's great. I'm so excited to delve into it, but I do have to ask you this one question, because you said that your husband was playing with your daughter in this very Danish way. Can you just describe what that looks like, or is, or how we can maybe do it ourselves? What is that about?
I tell you. I mean, it's a scene that is embedded in my memory because it's literally like the aha moment of my life. So he was on the floor with her. She was afraid of a spider, and he got on the floor with her, and he was helping her turn her fear into curiosity. So he was pointing out the legs and how they, how the hairs, how they make, how they make webs, and explaining. And like I watched as her fear became curiosity, and she stopped focusing on the negative and started focusing on the positive. This is what we call reframing in the book. And it's a very Danish thing. Like all Danes, they're just extremely, not exaggerated positive, but very good at finding positive details in like negative situations. And this they pass on to their kids. And like my daughter still loves bugs.
Wow, that's incredible. And I love the idea of reframing. I know that's part of your acronym for parent. You say in your book that for Americans, stress levels are really high, and we feel judged by others and by ourselves. and you point to constant comparisons and a need to keep up with the Joneses. You say that part of this is human nature and part of it is what it is to be American. You ask the reader, what if some of our answers we have for raising our kids to these questions that we have, our parenting norms are flawed? So in that regard, clearly the Danish way of parenting is quite different. So what in just a couple of sentences do you think is the crux of what makes the Danish way of parenting so different from other cultures? And is this approach, this is really important, but is this approach applicable outside of Denmark?
That's a great question. I would say fundamentally, I think the biggest difference is they actively teach empathy from when children are very small. And it's such a part of their culture that they're just naturally very empathic. Denmark is voted as, I think, the most trusting and empathic country in the world as well. And we know that empathy is a huge factor in happiness, yes. in not judgment, I can't speak now, in not judging others, in connecting, in collaboration. And I think that's one of the main things. And I absolutely think it's applicable not only in America, but anywhere else, even if it's one or two things. I always tell parents, even if you take one or two things that resonate with you, I think you can make a difference in the future happiness.
So when you're saying this idea that the crux of the difference is empathy, just tell us what that sounds like when you are listening to a parent with a child in Denmark. What are you hearing them say, or what are they doing to help pass on that idea of empathy to their kids so well?
It's not so competitive. It's not about how, it's not praising about like how great you are or good job. It's much more about the process and acknowledging children and pointing out the good in others. So like I was noticing in the language, I was often hearing, if they were playing with a child, it would be like, oh, do you see how sweet he is? Or look how nice he's being. It was like, it's really constantly pointing out good behavior in others. So it's directing you to see the good in others.
Oh, what a beautiful way.
Oh my God, totally. I mean, this book, I'm telling you, this changed me. It changes me every day. I'm still American and I have to actively work on it, right?
Yes. Oh,
but
I
it's
love
powerful.
that.
It's really powerful. And it really affects your well-being because first and foremost, we're people and then we're parents, right?
Yeah, and it's something when you're saying that you actively have to do it. I can feel that. I mean, when I'm doing my podcast, I feel like I'm in a master class all the time. Today I'm in a master class with you, and I'm so excited about it. And so what I just take away from that just brief thing that you just said, and what I would encourage other people to do is just take the time, like 2 or 3 times a day, to try to point the good out in somebody else to your child, because that's just one way of taking what you're saying and applying it right away. And it's such an easy thing to do. We're so frustrated with sibling rivalry. I mean, this morning my kids were totally at it with each other, and it's frustrating. My husband's at a business, in a business thing right now, and I'm trying to get them out for school, and they're frustrated and they're irritating each other, and I'm like, And in that moment, it would have been so important for me to take that Danish way of parenting and look for the good and help my child to see the good in their brother or sister, so that it alleviates the argument and starts to point things in a positive direction. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And with siblings, I think, my big learning curve there was never to compare them, and and not, like, again, with this reframing, empathy is very tied to reframing. So it's this thing about, instead of labeling other kids being annoying or whatever, is that you look for the good in them instead, right? Well, maybe she's tired. Maybe that's why she's acting that way. You help them find you help your kids find the meaning behind behavior.
So good. So
and this you could do with siblings too, and it really helps. I mean, I'm like, knock on wood, but so far I'm really happy with my kids' relationship. But it it's never perfect, right? But
Right.
I do think it would be different if I had done it just as I was raised.
Okay. I'm going to take that point that you're making and apply it, because my kids are 16 months apart, and they fight a little bit like cats and dogs sometimes.
Yep.
Best friends and drive each other bananas. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to really apply that maybe 2 to 3 times a day, looking for the good in the other, so that and certainly praising it and recognizing it when one of them does it for the other. That would be amazing. So you talk about parenting as a verb in your book and point to the fact that we sometimes forget about that. There's something very important about self-awareness in parenting. It's not all energy out. There's energy that needs to be expended inward so that we can parent to the best of our ability. And you even talk about a story of when you were with your son in the city and he was riding too close to the cars to illustrate the point. So can you tell us more about this and how the Danish way of parenting involves reprogramming those default settings you were mentioning, so that we can change in a positive direction that you encapsulate in this acronym PARENT?
Yes. Okay. So again, like I think it's really important as parents that it is a verb. It's like love. Love is a verb. It's to be in a long-term relationship. It's not easy, and it takes work. And I think parenting is the same. And I don't think we can change everything, but if we choose, again, 1 or 2 things, I think we make a huge difference. And this example I used was of a huge thing that I changed. So I was raised in an authoritarian family, and, spanking was normal, and I never questioned it. I thought it was normal. And I think there's a lot of people that also, I know it's changing, but I still think it's very common for a lot of people. And so it wasn't until I met my husband and I started talking about, like, well, how are we going to discipline? How are we going to discipline? And he said, why are you so obsessed with discipline? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, what are we going to do? And he said, look, we'll manage it before it's got to discipline. But I realized that. So when I talked to him about spanking, he looked at me like I was crazy. And I started questioning it, and I found out that in Denmark, spanking has been illegal for like more than 20 years.
Wow.
And I did research, and I found it was illegal in like 53 other countries. And when I started asking other Danes about spanking, have you ever been in an airplane that has ashtrays?
I guess that was a long, long time ago.
But still, sometimes you take a plane and it has ashtrays.
I think they're cemented closed at this point.
Yeah, but it's just so crazy to think about.
I know my husband actually said, like, he remembers when his mother used to smoke on, like, that, his mother used to smoke on planes, and that there was like a smoking section, like that was going to keep the smoke from going to the other non-smoking section or something.
Right. Yeah. Right. But so that's how, so that was one of the things I was determined, like, this is something I definitely want to change. But for a lot of people that were raised in an authoritarian family, this is very much ingrained in you when you are scared or pushed to your limits or exhausted or, desperate.
Yes.
To like in that case, my son was going to run out in the road, and I noticed that my default setting would have been to grab him and like spank him, like, to say stop, because I was scared of him running in the road. And I grabbed my head and I was like, oh my God, no, find another way. And I got down and I looked and I said, do you see the cars? The cars go ow, ow, and I said, do you want to go ow, ow? And he said, no. And I was like, cars go ow, ow, stop when I say stop. And he nodded and he goes, pointed to the cars and goes, cars go ow, ow. And he hugged me. And I was like, I felt amazing because I knew that he understood what I was saying, but I also stopped myself.
Yes.
I conquered myself in that moment. And I think that is the verb to parent.
So important. I really appreciate that story, and I can feel what you're talking about, because we always have these types of moments that happen where we're like, yes, that went the way that it should have, or I think that was the best of me, because I stopped and I paused and I thought to myself, what's really the right thing to do in this moment? Not what I'm programmed to do, but really what is the right parenting move in this moment. And you're right, you feel really good after that, because you feel like this felt good to all the people. And just to point out, I mean, just to put high beams on one of the things that you're mentioning here, is that your child in that moment wasn't defying you so much as not understanding what it was that he was supposed to do. Why would he need to stop going and having fun? Because he's new to this world in that moment. He's 3 years old. He doesn't know that this is what can happen when you're around the cars. We know as parents, but he doesn't. And I think a lot of the time when we're with our kids, you have to realize that we have to educate our children in these manners and then give them the knowledge so that they can make good choices. And they don't always know. So punishing them in that moment for not knowing is actually crazy if we really stop to think about it.
Yes, but I think many parents do it. The reason I want to stress, like in these moments because the default settings that we have come out when we are pushed beyond our limits.
Yes.
When we run out of surplus. The only way you can parent in a new way is when you have a little tiny bit of surplus.
Yes, you're right. You're so right. And that's when we default to yelling and deep frustration, and yes, perhaps spanking for those people who have that as their default setting. I really get that. It was very, very much, more common as we were growing up for children to be spanked. Now you're right. I think that things have been changing, but it still is an issue, and I think the more people learn about that it's not the right way to go.
I mean, I think if you consider that it's illegal in these countries, right? I mean, illegal for 20 years. We would look at it as crazy, and I mean, I know it's not really cool for me to say that I had this spanking as a default setting, but I say it also to reach out to those parents who have, and I think that's why it is so important to look at how we were raised,
exactly,
both by our culture and by our parents, and because that default will come out under pressure.
You're right. I think my husband and I were both spanked as kids, and we had a conversation before we had our kids that this wasn't something that we were going to do. But I do feel that what you're talking about, because there have been times when we've had this conversation that when we were spanked, we didn't do that behavior again because we were fearful of doing the behavior.
Yes.
And that's so it's an argument that a lot of people will go to. But, when I was spanked, I didn't do it again. But there are better ways of our children understanding why the behavior is not a good one or an unsafe one or an unfair one than to make it so they're fearful of the behavior, not because they necessarily understand what was going on in that manner.
Yeah, and I think, like the main difference, one of the big differences in let's say, Danish parenting, which was a big shift for me, is it's a very respect-based style. So they absolutely in no way want their children to fear them.
Okay. Yes.
At all.
Mm-hmm.
That's like no way they want their kids to fear them. They want them to respect them.
Right. Okay. I think just to go a little bit further on that point, because I think people would be asking, how is it then that we establish that respect when they're doing a behavior, you're saying no, and maybe they still don't listen in that time, and you want there to be a mutual respect? And what happens when things start to escalate more? What's your next move?
Right. Well, I think again, it's a long-term process, right? So it's not obviously what I started noticing was, I think in the American culture, we're much quicker to use ultimatums generally.
Yes, the ultimatums, yes.
this comes back to being a bit of a competitive culture, just naturally. I'm just saying, like, as a cultural difference, right? Like, we are a competitive culture, so it's an I win culture, and this spills over into the parenting because we don't realize that we immediately go into like an I win, you lose situation.
Right.
And this was what I noticed in Denmark. They don't immediately, actually, as little as they can, they don't jump to ultimatums because that immediately puts you into the power struggle.
Right, right. And you say that these power struggles are the things that can help us, sort of lose our temper. And yet at the same time, we expect the children to keep their cool. So if they're not, so I would love for you to tell us, since we're very much about like how we're talking to kids about these types of things, what the parent does or says instead of using the ultimatums. Help us to sort of hear what a conversation might sound like if a child is doing a behavior that may be hurting another person or unfair to another child, and you want them to stop. We might go to, you have to stop doing that, or this is what's going to happen. What would it sound like in Denmark?
Well, there's a lot of explanation. That's why I said also this thing about explaining to Sebastian when the car, it's like the car go out in a language they can understand, just because they're 2 or 1.5, there's a lot of things how you can explain and things they understand, like that hurt, ow, that hurts, that goes ow, and you make a no, and out. So it's like, and again, kids sometimes need it 1 or 2 times. Right? They need it explained, but that's okay. Sometimes we need things explained.
Sure.
More times.
Right.
So it's like I'm not going to immediately jump to, if you do that again, or immediately I'm the powerful one and you have. It's more like, how do I get this message across so that they hear me in a way that they can understand? I mean, I'll give you another example. Like, often power struggles at dinner time, right? Because we want kids to eat,
right? And
they need to eat what we want them to eat, and they need to eat now, and then and so like in Denmark, they'll put out things on the table, and they feel like as a parent their responsibility to put the food out for the child, right? But there's a lot of things that can affect appetite and phases of eating, and this also depends on age, and so there's a lot of understanding of that. But just to tell you, like a trick my husband used, I put it in the book, that works amazingly well, is instead of immediately going into, if you need to eat that now or finish your plate or etc., he'd be like, don't you want to be big and strong?
Right.
And he'll be like, yeah, and he'll say, okay, well, if you eat that, that's going to make you big and strong. He says, watch, taste that, and let me feel your muscle.
Yes, we do this too.
And then he takes a bite, and he feels his muscle.
Yeah,
and he's
sure.
like, whoa.
Wow.
And then if he he'll like finish it.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times. So
yes.
I mean, it's a silly example, but it's just to say that there's a lot of other ways to go instead of the immediate, I win, you lose. You have to listen. It's a way of thinking differently.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We often will also add, like, I'd be like, wait a second, I can't be the smallest in this family. No, you're just going to have to stop eating that. Let's instead of these vegetables, let's just take these away, and I'm just going to give you candy, because then I'll keep you nice and small and weak. They're like, no, this was they give me the vegetables. I even I cut the vegetables early, and then they, this was especially happening when they were young, but I still do this, and they would, like go over and they sort of would steal one. I'd be like, wait, you can't steal those vegetables.
Right,
come back here.
Right.
But I always put them out early, because if they're hungry, then they're going to just go ahead and eat those. But I think you're right. It's just thinking a little bit differently so that the kids will do the behavior that you know is good for them without having to parent in a way that might not be so great.
So again, it takes a bit of surplus, but it's like, it's also about awareness. Like, how fast, it's asking yourself, how fast do I go into ultimatums?
Yes.
What are our big lines of parenting? What's most important for my partner and I, or for myself, whoever's raising your children? Is it that they're a soldier, or that they have a appreciation for food?
Good point.
do I need to take this battle in front of my friends right now because he's not doing what I want or she's not, I think also we get stressed by other people.
Yes.
We feel judged.
Yes. Right.
And this pushes us to, because we're like, oh, they need to do this now because I'm
all of a sudden I'm a bad parent if my child's not eating right now. Right.
And that's where I think it's like you have to keep in mind what's really important for you, for your child, and to shut out that judgment or that feeling of judgment.
Right. And sometimes we have to think to ourselves, like, would we want somebody telling us what to eat and when to eat and to, like, wait a second, I don't know if I would like that right now. If you want to eat the potatoes first on your plate, then I want to eat the potatoes first on my plate. So yes, I agree with what you're saying. I like the example of food, since I think a lot of people do have that struggle. And I know that, it circulates and people are thinking, all right, how am I applying this to technology and brushing teeth? And I think it applies in all places, that there are different ways of doing this. But I appreciate the acknowledgement that we need to have the surplus because, hey, parents, we're tired, and I get that. And we get stressed out. I was just, like I said, stressed out this morning with, being alone and needing to, it happens to be a special day at school and I have to do this for my child also on top of everything else. It was just not going as smoothly as I wanted to. So, I could feel myself getting frustrated during that time. So I think it's good to just take that pause, because really, is it more important to get all of these things done in this one timely fashion, or is it more important to take that time to parent in a way that you're proud of? Yeah.
So here's another example of the verb, I would say. I've also had these times where mornings were really stressful, and they are. And what can you do? You're stressed, you're pushed to the limit, and it's not pleasant. So there's two things I would say here. One, and this is very important, is this concept of empathy. First, it goes to yourself.
Absolutely.
This is huge.
Yes.
Because, we're not perfect, and we're trying. And I think we have to we have to forgive ourselves and be like, look, I'm going to do better tomorrow.
Exactly.
Because, if you're forgiving to yourself, you're going to be forgiving to others. And sometimes we have to say sorry to our kids, and I think that also shows we're human.
You are right. It's a good example too.
But in terms of the morning, so what I started to do, even though it was like, it wasn't my favorite thing. I mean, I started getting up like 40 minutes earlier. Even though I didn't want to, I did, because it made everything go so much less, with less stress.
Yes, right. And you have some quiet time, and you're getting things done, whether it's lunch or something else, in a fashion when you don't have to also be attending to your children or whatever it is that you need to get done.
Right, and even being able to enjoy them a little bit in the morning.
Good point. Yes. So that's a really interesting piece, the whole piece on empathy and ultimatums. I just really appreciate that. I know in your chapter on play, you say that in Denmark, there isn't a sole emphasis on education or sports, but rather on the whole child. I live in a town where, sports are bananas here. So I get it. And I have two kids that are not like that into it, but just like a little bit different. My daughter's into gymnastics. My son is into archery, but it's like not the, soccer, baseball, all that kind of stuff. So, but I do see it. My kids' friends this one's going to softball in the morning, and then they're going to soccer in the afternoon. And it can get a little crazy. Parents and teachers focus on things like socialization and autonomy and cohesion and democracy and self-esteem when you're talking about the Danish way. And those are providing vehicles for kids to simply play after school. I mean, they actually have a time for them to just play. So the Danish way is to let children just play for a good portion of the day. So what do you feel like we need to take away from how the Danish regard and incorporate play into the children's day? And what tips do you have for us when it comes to play for our kids?
Okay, quite a lot, because this was a big thing for me as well. Let me first start by saying that their belief is that if children's lives are always basically organized by an adult, because that's what it is. If they're doing sports all the time, then they're always doing something for a coach, for a parent. It's sort of organized for them. So if kids don't have that time to decide themselves Okay. Because that's what free play is. It's like, I'm going to invent, I'm going to create, I'm going to run on this log or draw this, then for them, that's building self-esteem, which is different than self-confidence.
Right. And this is far from the video game playing. You're talking about natural sort of outdoor or indoor play,
yes, that they choose it, that they have time to just play as they want. They think this is crucial for, so I'll just explain. In Denmark, they have a difference between self-confidence and self-esteem. So self-confidence are all the things you're good at that people can see. So it's like your grades, your trophies, your diplomas, et cetera, et cetera. And this is like the leaves of a tree. Your self-esteem is like how you feel about who you are, regardless of all that, and how you with the belonging you feel with your family, etc. It's the roots, and the leaves. If you spend too much time on the leaves, right, and too little on the roots, what happens when the storm comes?
Yeah, get blown over, don't you?
Exactly. And a lot of people that have tons of leaves or have a huge foliage.
Oh boy, do we ever! Yes,
right. And that to me is also a big cultural difference. So that's a very more American way, and I don't feel we realize it as much, that we're neglecting the roots.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I feel the same way, and it's hard on the children when they're pushed to these limits outside of necessarily what they absolutely love. They kind of like, maybe they kind of like it. They think it's all right. But then you also have the children who are doing it because their parents want them to.
Of course. And children want to do what their parents want.
They want to please their parents. They want to make them happy.
You.
Sure.
So this is this external locus of control. This is this external, it's not coming from within the child, right? Whereas free play, there's no praise in play. There's no trophies. There's no special awards.
Yes, right.
It's all, and it's building creativity and collaboration and negotiation. They're testing their own limits, like how far can I push myself on this rock or this tree or these. They're testing their fear and developing coping mechanisms that help with anxiety later on. But the thing is that because we as adults, this is me speaking as my American glasses on, I feel like because there's no proof that they're learning or achieving or whatever, we don't allow that much time for it.
You know what is so interesting from what you're saying is, that when we've talked about on this podcast, that when we interfere with children's ability to be self-directed, to do things on their own, whether it's packing their bag in the morning or, getting their homework done, we actually interfere with brain development. And I feel like we could apply the same thing right here, that when we keep interfering with their ability to have self-directed play, to just have unstructured play, we also are interfering with brain development because they're not getting those coping mechanisms that you're talking about. They're not seeing how they can fill their time with things that they enjoy and really develop their own passions. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I mean, again, you have to consider that in Denmark, play is an educational theory. It's been an educational theory since 1871. It is the most important thing a child can do. This is the same in Finland, by the way, which has the best global education system in the world. So these countries, they're neighbors anyway, they're, until age of basically 7 and then on, I mean, play is the most important thing.
I think a lot of the people in America often feel that play is the kids sort of goofing off, wasting time in a lot of ways, that we need to be doing something constructive rather than, just jumping off of a rock, as you're saying, or playing with dirt or sticks. So it's an interesting difference of philosophy.
Yeah, but this is where I would say that this is one of my biggest paradigm shifts in the Danish way, because I knew this for a long time. I knew that play was a big deal. One of the first discussions I had with my husband was, he's one of the most accomplished people I know, but he's super humble. And I was asking him, I was like, okay, well, what did you do when you were little? And he's like, I played.
Yeah, I played.
And I said, yeah, but I mean, come on, I did like gymnastics,
Yes,
and piano,
right.
and I was like, what did you do? He's
Yeah.
like, I played.
I played.
I learned over time. I saw how it is the most. It's like a real thing, and so it took me a long time to have this paradigm shift of like, wow, no, it really is learning, and I had to be strong. This is where the judgment came in, because I would go home and I would hear friends that were like, oh yeah, my child is doing whatever for John Hopkins block building class, and my kid is doing the black belt in karate, and what is I'm like, she's playing.
I feel like in so many ways we need to ask our kids, like, what is it that you want to do with your time? Like, what do you love to do? Because, you have a child who loves martial arts. They should, of course, go ahead and do a martial arts class. But during the other times during the week, like, they don't have to go, 7 days a week. My child goes to gymnastics once a week. And so, there's times when she comes home and she's like, I wonder if there's anybody who can have a play date. I'm like, I don't know if anybody's going to be available. I'll be honest with you, because, there's like people are in soccer and they're this or that. My son's the same, the same thing. He has archery on Saturday mornings, but like he doesn't there's not all this constant stuff going on. Like, he's baseball and this and that. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, honey. He's like, it's not that people wouldn't want to play with you, but they are really busy. Like this is like a sports time after school. This is what people are doing,
Yeah, totally. I hear this from most of my American friends and parents, that it's like impossible. There's no even, birthdays and stuff. It's like, okay, from this hour to this hour, I had a friend who came to visit me and we had a birthday, and it just went on and on and on and on. She was like, oh my God, this would never happen.
No, I know. I said to my son, I was like, okay, we just need to make sure, like, he has two really good friends at school. I'm like, okay, one of them has track in the morning on the day of your birthday party, and the other one has soccer in the evening. So we're going to put the birthday party at 1:30 so that, we can make sure that, these two kids can get there.
Having said that, it's like, I totally understand. It's difficult because when everybody else is doing this, we feel pressure as a parent to do this. So I totally get it. But it's even, you have to consider that if you do like eliminate a couple of activities, right, and believe in this concept of play, and there's something else I want to add to that, then it also reduces stress for the whole family, because you don't have to make that extra drive. You don't have to make that. And this isn't just about them playing. It's also about parents taking some time to play with their kids. And in a way where there's no expectations. And that it's just about connecting with them. And that's where the well-being comes in, is that time together where you're just being, not doing, is where the roots and the connection and the presence and that chapter on hygge, it's a whole thing. We won't talk about it now. But hygge is this presence and connection with your family, which is like the heart of it all.
Oh, such a beautiful way of looking at this, that this is part of really making sure those roots are strong and that you have the time. I think so many people are so frazzled right now because they don't have the time. I think you're hitting on something really important. I do want to ask you a little bit more about that idea of togetherness, but can you tell us about authenticity in your book? I was struck when you said in particular that emotional honesty, not perfection, is what children truly need for parents. It sort of goes along with what we were talking about. And tell us more about how we can parent with this authenticity and how that benefits our children.
I would say one of the biggest differences that I noticed is that they're very, very honest with their children about everything. So all topics are on the table from whenever. So because their motto is, if it's part of life, it should be part of education. So that includes, our bodies, sex, death, all of it. I always use the example of The Little Mermaid, which many people think is, she gets the prince, it's a happy story, but it's actually a Danish fairy tale. And in the original version, she dies from sadness and turns into sea foam because she doesn't get the prince. And this is like a typical Danish kind of fairy tale.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book, like these movies are like so sad.
I would joke with my husband, like immediately I know in a movie it's going to be Danish. But it's because they feel like life is not only happiness.
Mm-hmm. The happiest people make sad movies. Is that what you're telling me?
But so this is something, and the way I describe it in some of my presentations is they look at emotions as sort of like a color wheel. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a color wheel, you wouldn't say that red is better than brown or blue is better than orange. And for them, it's the same. Mm-hmm. So happiness isn't better than sadness, and anger isn't better than frustration. And so what's important is that kids learn about all of the emotions.
What a great way of looking at it. Wow. Yeah.
Because I mean, imagine if our life was only made up of purple.
Right. No, it's a really good point, and it wouldn't look so purple to us anymore.
It wouldn't look. It would right. And it's funny because we're so focused on happiness as the only emotion, and yet I find and they're because they're so focused on really exposing kids to all emotion and saying, look, life has everything to. Life is not a fairy tale. So this and this helps them learn that early on, and I think it makes them more resilient. Because they don't get shocked when bad things happen or when they experience upsetting emotions because it's really the ultimate way of self-regulating. So they read them a lot of, I think it's important to read stories that encompass all kinds of emotions. There's a book that's actually translated to English from Danish called Cry Heart But Never Break, I think. It just talks about death. It's really, I thought it was really good. And it's not about having the answers. It's just about being honest as much as you can be. It's like if you're sad, it's okay. It's okay to be sad. It's like you don't have to hide it and be like, no, everything's okay.
Right. And it goes to the point also that our kids would be much more likely to talk to us about things that might be bothering them and come to us when they're in need because nothing is hidden and everything is available.
Yes. It's like I say, it's about creating a conversation that lasts through life rather than, about certain topics, let's say. And yeah, I mean, the more vulnerable and emotionally honest we are, the more they know that they can be too.
Okay. Oh, I loved that whole section. That's really something. Before we kind of get to the close, I'd love to ask you just a little bit about that togetherness idea. What would you say is like the really important message about Danish togetherness and making sure that you're spending that special time with children?
Okay, the word is called hygge. It's become a very popular word these days. But the way that it's being described and used, I find is very superficial. It's like people talk about hygge, which basically means cozy times together with family. Many people are talking about it as like warm blankets and tea and cozy socks. And I don't know. This is how I've seen it being, sold products with.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. If you look up hygge, you'll see woolly socks and warm tea and whatever. But for me, hygge, it's a very Danish concept. You can't have a conversation without hearing it. It's for me, it's much more of a psychological space that you enter into with your family. And when you enter into the hygge space, this is how I describe it so that we can understand it as non-Danes. It's like you take off your work stress, your complaining, your negativity, bragging, anything that could slightly divide you from someone else. So it's like almost takes awareness to like, I'm coming into this space now to be present together with the ones that I love. You leave your phone, you leave your, all that stuff. All that stuff will be waiting for you outside, right? But for like this period of time, I'm going to be present in the moment with my family. And this can be your kids, this can be your family, this can be your friends, but let's start with our family. And so you can do things like play games, talk about good memories from the past. This is very connecting in the moment in a positive way. Focus on the food. It's a team effort. That's what people have to understand about hygge, is that you have to all be aware of it to make it happen. But kids absolutely love it because they love spending drama-free time with their family. Like they cling to you like you cannot believe. And the thing you have to keep in mind is that even if hygge for us takes awareness and effort, it's work a little bit, they will grow up to do it naturally. When we make these special times for togetherness, leaving all that stuff out. The way I always describe it is, you hear about mindfulness, right? About being in the moment, present. It's like it's the huge thing now. I describe hygge as the next step, which is, it's not mindfulness, it's we-fulness.
I love it. I love that. That was beautiful. And what a great thing to take away. Yes.
It is. I can't tell how much it's changed my American family. I mean, it's really transformed us. I always say people can find the hygge oath, which is something you can print out from my site and like put on your refrigerator so that everybody can see like the kind of basic things you need to do.
Right. And it's just an agreement that this is this special time with our family, and we're going to leave all this behind. It's sort of an agreement that as we enter this space, we're going to just be focused on one another and loving one another.
Yes, and it's not me time. It's not about me. It's about we.
Right. Somebody's
and like
doing
I said,
it together.
Sounds simple, but it's harder than you think.
Yeah.
Right. That's why it's important to have people to agree. And I can't. It's like it's time limited. So like for us, a lot of times our hygge time is in the morning. Actually, I light a candle at the table, and people kind of know this is like hygge time. Nice. Or it's, like if it's 20 minutes when you come home, that presence of your play can be a hygge moment. It's like I said, with my family, we've started we're starting to know it now. And so we have these moments where we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about anything that's going to make us divided.
Nice.
Yes.
Oh, it's just a beautiful, beautiful way of being, and I love to take that away.
I mean, the thing about it is again, it sounds really simple, but when you create these moments, and I almost feel like they're oases of time, where it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter what's going on outside. You create this oasis for your family, and it is so recharging for the soul, and you realize like how important it is that we have that time.
Yes, for everybody.
Yes, for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's because it's such a small, simple thing, but can make such a difference.
I love it. So at this point, let's get to our top tip. So for those parents who haven't been parenting the Danish way, that love to incorporate some of the things that you're talking about, what would be your top tip, or you can do top 2 or 3, that you would say we should absolutely start doing that would help move us in the positive direction towards this Danish way of parenting?
Okay, well, first I say there's no right way. So the Danish way is just like a philosophy that I'm kind of sharing, because I feel like sometimes people hear it's a way, that it's not. It's just a philosophy that's very interesting, I think, coming from this perspective of being the happiest country in the world. So I think the top thing any parent can do anywhere in the world is to reflect on your own culture and your own upbringing and ask, is there anything that I might do differently? Like, and I think choosing, not overcomplicating it, not making it, I got to do this because this stresses us out. I mean, choosing like 1 or 2 things that you would like to be better from your upbringing or your culture or whatever,
right? And
like really making an effort to focus on 1 or 2 things,
right? And realizing you can let go of some of the things you've been doing, because perhaps the reason why you've been doing them is not because anybody particularly enjoys it, but because it's what you've always done.
Exactly. Exactly. And I hope if people read the book, I mean, I hope it's enlightening in that sense, because I compare a lot of the American ways, you know? So I hope it will give some insight into like, you know, do I agree with having sports every single day? Do I agree with that? You know what I mean? Like it's everybody will have their own, it will resonate with everyone in a different way and for different reasons.
Right.
And I think wherever you feel it's strongest, like for me, maybe it was empathy, hygge, and no ultimatums, right? But for someone else, it would be play and, you know, various different things. I just think just choose two things and work on those, because the more we improve even two things, we're changing the future.
So true, and what an important thing to do for yourself is just to reflect on those things and see what works for me, what works for us as a family, what can I let go of, what can I embrace that will actually bring some calm and some joy into our family at a time that maybe has been feeling more of like a struggle or more frustrating or harried or hurried. So it's a great idea to just stop and think this through for a little while. And I think that's a great top tip. Thank you so much for that.
No problem. And then the second one I would say is this thing I repeat again, is that then have empathy for yourself.
Oh, good point. Yes.
Be kind to yourself, then you'll be kinder to everyone else.
Right. Because it's so easy to bash ourselves and say, oh my gosh, look what I've been doing all this time. And I don't agree with it. What was I thinking? But we do need to have some empathy for ourselves and some self-compassion and understand where all of this has been coming from, and that we are imperfect people, and that's okay, because we are human, and human is just fine. It's just exactly fine. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for all of your insights and your strategies. I really have enjoyed listening to how the Danish Way has inspired you, and I really find the philosophy so interesting and really easy to incorporate into our lives if we just take a moment to think and create the space to allow them to happen. So thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jessica, can you tell us the resource of the week? Where can we go to get more information about you and all the great things you're doing?
Okay, jessicajoellealexander.com. You can find information and the Hygge Oath, which is super important to download and print. And I'm on Instagram, JessicaJoelle_. And yeah, you can also read more on Facebook, Jessica Joelle Alexander, and the Danish Way.
Oh, excellent. Well, I appreciate you being on, and I've got my takeaways, and sweet friends, I know you have yours, so let's discuss them. Come up on Facebook. We can go to the Dr. Robyn Silverman page. We can chat about it at drrobynsilverman.com or twitter.com/Dr. Robyn. And I'm also on Instagram under Dr. Robyn Silverman, and we can go back and forth with Jessica. You'll see the memes that I create, taking some of the wonderful things that Jessica was saying, slap them on a meme so we can share them all over the place, because I think what she's been saying is very inspirational. And if you love this podcast like I did, I hope you'll go up to iTunes and rate and review it so others can hear about it and all the great suggestions that Jessica's had, all about her book. I really would appreciate it. The more that we review the podcast, the more people hear about our outstanding guests. That's all the time we have for today, my fellow parents, leaders, and educators. Thank you so much for tuning in to How to Talk to Kids About Anything. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com. So many great podcasts are up there, and the show notes to this podcast will be up there as well. I look forward to weathering the storms and enjoying the sunny side of life together. And please remember, even on the days when you fall short, you've got this. You're here. You're getting the information you need. I know you heard things today and you're thinking, oh, goodness, what have I been doing? I shouldn't have been doing that. I shouldn't have been saying that. But you know what? You are here, and there is always tomorrow. Parenting is the ultimate do-over. I see you and I'm right there with you. There are things that I'm going to take from this podcast that I'm going to be applying to my own kids. We all can do these great things, whether it's about togetherness or empathy or no ultimatums. And so there are moments when we doubt our know-how and our choices and our sweet sanity. Please know you're 10 times the parent you think you are. Until next time, this is Dr. Robyn Silverman with How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Please tune in again and keep connecting through conversation. See you next week.
You've been listening to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman. For more information,